What's happening in Afghanistan is the fault of Joe Biden and his administration, and it's another example of the failures of this president. And don't take my word for it. There's a veteran named Matt Zeller who gave this impassioned speech on MSNBC saying they tried over and over again to give the Biden administration a plan to say this is what is going to happen. This fall is coming and you must prepare for it. And they didn't listen. He said the Biden administration was more concerned about looking bad than actually making sure it didn't go bad. Well, it's funny how you get that self-fulfilling prophecy. When you don't plan, what is saying? It's if you don't plan, you're planning to fail, something like that. Now the media is roasting Joe Biden for blame shifting. But I want to say something. I think that's a fair point. I really, really do. I think Joe Biden gave a speech the other day. It was pretty good. It was. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to pretend that, Joe Biden is just always wrong or always evil. No, we have to make sure we're actually addressing what was said and what was done and be honest. And the reality is Joe Biden said some things that I think are fantastic and people need to hear. I also think he's desperately trying to deflect blame. And the best thing he could do was get a speechwriter to say the things we wanted to hear. Empty words, my friend. Empty words. And I will also point out the irony of the one thing Biden getting praised for speaking I did not think was possible, but here we are. He is getting roasted by the media for this, though. But I don't want to be that guy who's always like, no matter what Biden does, it's wrong. No, I'm not playing Biden derangement syndrome. Biden said we can't send our men and women in uniform to fight a war that the Afghans are not willing to fight themselves. And I'm like, yes. The country fell so quick. It's sad. It really is. And I do think it could have remained if it were not for Biden. I think under Trump, Taliban would have been a bit more scared. I think Trump would have sent in some drones. I think he would have been screaming like as they were advancing, like posting on Twitter, like we're going to. And a lot of people seem to think that Trump would have started taking militaristic action. Well, I mean, it's hard to know exactly what Trump would do. The deadline was originally May 1st. Biden moved it back. And it's remarkable to me. You got to see this video from this guy, Matt Zeller. And, he's very much on the side of getting out. I think it's 86,000 people that should have been evacuated a long time ago. This just goes to show the Biden admin screwed everything up. So I want to make sure this is clear. Because I'll show you some opinions from some conservatives or some right-wing individuals saying if Trump gave that speech, people would be praising him for it. And I think that's true. I just think the issue is Joe Biden is empty words. He can come out and say whatever he wants after this major screw up. It's the least he can do. And of course, I don't think he believes it. But let's get into this. Check it out. Biden is getting absolutely slammed across the board. The Daily Mail says Biden, a quote, Biden alone is responsible. U.S. media blast president for his blame shifting after willful abandonment of Afghanistan, where 0 U.S. soldiers have died in the last 18 months. But some left-wing press are back on his side. This is absolutely incredible that the turn on Joe Biden, his approval rating sinking. These images, there's a video right now. Let me just tell you something, guys. The landing gear on a C-17 is not the same as you'd see on like a plane, and people were sitting on it. And these videos are horrifying. But I think most of us at this point have heard about what's happening and what has happened with Kabul and the evacuation. But let's see how people are responding politically. I think this is important, especially as we're moving into 2022 in only a few months. And we're going to start seeing campaign season start. This will be a major, major moment for Republicans. The U.S. media blasted Joe Biden today for his blame shifting over the Afghanistan crisis after the president criticized Afghan leaders and military for refusing to fight while defending his decision to withdraw troops. The Wall Street Journal said in an editorial that Mr. Biden refused to accept responsibility for the botched withdrawal while blaming others. And the one group he conspicuously did not blame was the Taliban. I think that's a good point. Like they stormed in. It's the, all right, let's read a little bit more. I want to make a point. A Washington Post editorial said he could have listened to the many seasoned hands giving him alternatives to withdrawal, adding that him blaming others was unseemly, given that 2,448 U.S. service members died in 20 years. An editorial in the New York Post pointed out that no U.S. soldiers have died in Afghanistan in 18 months, and he alone is responsible for the Taliban takeover, which is an utter catastrophe for Afghans and for world security. Fact, 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 fact. However, I will not use this. I will not stand by as people use this to justify nation building and sending American soldiers and Canadian and UK for what reason? We want to go to some other country and build some schools and some buildings and then cross our fingers that in 20 years democracy kicks in? Is that what America is supposed to be? To these people, yes. And for the longest time, yes. And that's a damn shame. This is what the U.S. is. We have troops in Germany. We have troops all over the world. We have bases everywhere. This is what the U.S. is. And I think people need to wake up to what that means. It means that there will not be your tax dollars and your work benefiting you in the way you think. It will not be you and your neighbors coming together as a community to say, we want these things for ourselves. No, it's an extraction of your hard work so that the U.S. can be effectively the world police with our tendrils across the board. I suppose the globalists, the internationalists, whatever these people want to refer to themselves as, are happy about it. Absolutely happy. And they would prefer to see permanent military bases in Afghanistan. Why? Just another colony of the United States? How many people on the left are defending Joe Biden, but also complaining about colonization? It's absolutely laughable. I'm not a staunch nationalist. I actually fall rather in the middle between global and international interests. I certainly think the U.S. can be relatively open to a certain degree. I don't mean open borders or anything like that, but I think we can be more involved on the world stage, just not more involved to the point where we have military bases everywhere. And look, it breaks my heart. It really does. Seeing all of this, it breaks my heart. You look at these photos of the modernization in Afghanistan. People talk about the photos from the 70s of people wearing jeans and T-shirts, and then you get the rise of the Mujahideen, the U.S. supporting these groups, these individuals against the Soviet Union, and it all comes back to communism, I guess. Ideological battles. The U.S. providing weapons to groups they said will resist the Russians, and then what happens? Those groups go on to form Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and now here we are trapped in a mess of our own making. The U.S. decided, I guess, what were they thinking? Man, I'm not going to pretend to be a historian on this stuff. I look back at everything the U.S. has been doing there, and it seems like the U.S., knowing that they botched Afghanistan because of fighting against the Soviets, are now trying to, turn it into South Korea or Japan, putting permanent U.S. presence in there. Let me just say, there's a lot of people that are going to start using this. Look at this. The Washington Post said he could have many seasoned hands giving alternatives to withdrawal. No way, dude. The withdrawal was the right thing. It was the right thing, in my opinion. We are not the stewards of Afghanistan or any of these other countries for that matter. I'm sorry. I should say I wish we weren't, because it seems like we actually are. A really good point brought up the other day on Timcast IRL with Yossi Gestetner. He said, why are people upset about having a couple thousand, 2,000 troops in Afghanistan? I'm not saying he was in favor of. He was saying an interesting question is, we have troops stationed in South Korea right now. No one. Where's been the mass call for removal of our troops from South Korea? It's an interesting point. It really is. I think people should consider that and should think about what that means. Why do we have troops in South Korea? Because North Korea would storm in and the evil dictators would take over, and it'd be horrifying for the people of South Korea. Why did the U.S. intervene in the past? Why did they intervene in Afghanistan? It seems like what's happening in Afghanistan is still just a remnant of what happened with the Cold War. The U.S. wants to build a, liberal democracy or whatever they want to call it. I kind of wish we weren't, I suppose. I don't know. But maybe it's foolish. Maybe it's foolish because in the end, what do we get? A lack of security and instability? I don't know what to say other than let me just show you more of what we're seeing from the media. They say CNN, left-leaning CNN, a retired soldier, said Afghanistan's collapse was willful abandonment. I do agree with that. And that the withdrawal of U.S. forces left the tribes of Afghanistan little choice but capitulation. I think Joe Biden did it wrong. We talked about it last night. If Donald Trump was in office, I know people don't like Donald Trump, but you got to hear it because it's the truth. Trump would not have allowed this. Trump ordered the withdrawal for May 1st. There was 14 months to prepare. They would have gotten rid of a lot of the military equipment if they knew it was going to fall, or they would have used drone. We talked about this on IRL numerous times with veterans, saying you can have a very, very small contingent with a drone presence and you're good. And it turns out I think they were all right. Instead, Joe Biden's just like, I don't know what to do, so This is what you vote. This is what you get when you vote against an administration, not for. They voted to elect against. They didn't vote for Joe Biden. They didn't say Joe Biden's pretty, not great, but I'll take him. They said Trump is bad. I don't care who. There was that article from The Atlantic. Stay alive, Joe Biden. I'm not kidding. They're going to say other U.S. media defended Biden, including the New York Times, which said that the calamity cannot be laid alone at the president's feet and that his decision to pull out all U.S. troops took courage and wisdom. I can respect. It's an interesting argument, isn't it? I'm glad that Joe Biden said we're going to follow through and we're going to end this. Man, think about what that means for the United States actually doing nation building in the United States. Think about the vast swaths of emptiness we have on the West Coast. Population density is substantially higher on the East Coast. Why aren't we developing cool stuff in our own country? Why are we developing stuff in Afghanistan? It's because I'm going to tell you, they want a homogenous global culture, I suppose. The U.S. goes there, wants people to behave more like we do. Is it not colonization? Shouldn't the left be all over this saying we shouldn't be there? And a lot of them probably are. The Atlantic said no critic of Biden or Trump's withdrawal decision has offered a coherent alternative plan beyond indefinite American occupation, adding the withdrawal was not a strategic failure. It was. That's absurd. An LA Times opinion piece said Mr. Biden made tough and correct choice to withdraw and end a losing effort in search of an unattainable goal, and that he was right to stand by his decision to end the mission. I'll tell you this. Out of everything that's been said, Matt Zeller, I think, makes a very important point. When MSNBC says, it was a good speech, he says, I feel like I watched a different speech than the rest of you guys. I was appalled that there was such a profound, bold-faced lie in that speech. Wow. Matt Zeller. He says, the idea that we plan for every contingency. I have been personally trying to tell this administration since it took office. I've been trying to tell our government for years that this was coming. Nobody listened to us. Biden said in his speech, I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there. We were clear-eyed about the risks. We planned for every contingency. But Biden said, I always promised to be straight with the American people. Zeller, a U.S. combat veteran, said, they didn't plan for the evacuation of our Afghan wartime allies. They're trying to conduct it now at the 11th hour. We had all the people and equipment in place to be able to save these people months ago, and we did nothing. I'm appalled that he thinks that we only need to take 2,000 people. There's 86,000 people who are currently left behind in Afghanistan alone. Wow. This guy knows better. This guy works on it. This guy's a combat vet. And I think Joe Biden is just trying to save face. So I want to throw it to Matt Walsh real quick. And Cassandra Fairbanks. As you know, Cassandra Fairbanks works for timcast.com, and she's a good friend. She said, I'm sorry, but that was a good speech. I know he botched a withdrawal and didn't address it, but the speech was well written. Kudos to the speechwriter. I agree. I do. This is a really interesting moment for us because you're seeing the tribal lines kind of just split. I see a lot of people tribalistically saying Biden's too stupid. The speech was bad and everything was wrong. And I'm like, I'm not playing that game. I liked when he said the Afghan nationals won't even fight for themselves. Why should we? And I'm like, yes. Yeah. I mean, at least with the U.S. bases in Europe, you had a resistance against Nazi Germany. In this instance, these people within hours had just given everything up to the Taliban, in which case Biden was right. There was no good time to withdraw, something many of the anti-interventionists and anti-war people have been saying for a long time. Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire says 95% of the speech was something Trump might have delivered, and everyone on the right would have loved it if he did. You are correct in your assessment. Obviously, Biden is a lying, incompetent, dementia-ridden buffoon, but that's besides the point. Yes, absolutely. Here's why it's important. With what Joe Biden said about the failures of Afghanistan, it has vindicated so many people, the more libertarian individuals of the anti-war, left, right, whatever. Ron Paul, especially. I remember thinking back to what he said, and I mentioned this before, prescribing the wrong medication and staying on it makes no sense. You've got to get it off. Why were we still there? We knew it wasn't going to work 15 years ago. Now, I'm glad Joe Biden followed through. I'm more glad that Donald Trump came in and laid down the hammer. You know why? Joe Biden pointed out that we drew down from like 15,500 troops, which is insane, to 2,500. which is a lot better. I was talking to Sean Parnell, right? He's running for Senate in PA. And I was talking about Iraq and Afghanistan. And I can't remember if he was referring to one specifically, but he mentioned having a small contingent of, trained officers, very small, and some drone operations, and you are good. And I'm like, I'll take that compromise, 100%. If it avoids what's happening in Afghanistan now, I will say, okay. You've got people who are angry and don't want to see it completely fall to the Taliban, and I don't. I don't like the idea that the U.S. is over there in the first place. I wish we cared more about our own country and our own people. And that's something every leftist should be behind, but they're all internationalists, so I guess they don't care. You want to talk about universal health care. You want to talk about helping the working class. Come on. But we can have foreign policy interests. Okay, I respect that. We made a mistake. We botched it up. 15,000. Why? That's nuts. Maybe a small group, drone operations. I would be willing to accept that begrudgingly because I don't think we should have been there in the first place. Instead, it's all or nothing. But I will say it isn't just the tribalism is fascinating. What's fascinating now, especially, is you can see who's being honest with you about their principles and who's a grifter. Yeah, Cassandra Fairbanks said she liked the speech. Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post said she liked the speech too. And people are criticizing Cassandra as if she's done something wrong. No, she's just being honest with you as she does. Cassandra says, that's exactly what I said while I was watching it. I turned to tweet Brett Mack and was like, Trump could have given this and everyone would be like, heck yeah. Obviously, he sucks and was avoiding the obvious issues people have. But the speech itself was well written and I liked a lot of the lines. I completely agree. Matt says, get ready. Republicans are going to fully revert back to neocon globalist interventionism. They took a break from that stuff for 4 years in order to align with Trump. But now they will get back to their roots. Cassandra says, I'm watching it happen in real time, and it's really disappointing. Feeling extra politically homeless the last few days. She's and then going on to mention, in terms of being an isolationist. Someone said non-interventionalist is better than isolationist. Isolationism is the jackal's term to discredit non-intervention. And Cassandra said no. Isolationist is what George Washington and the majority of Americans were before World War II, when the people who wanted us to join had to demonize the people fighting against that. Washington and Jefferson knew what's up. Quote, it is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliance with any portion of the foreign world. It was George Washington's farewell address to us. The inaugural pledge of Thomas Jefferson was no less clear. Peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations entangling alliances with none. I'm not an isolationist. I disagree with Cassandra in that regard. I am anti-interventionist to a great degree. And I've asked these questions because I'm not a moral absolutist. I'm not going to sit here and be like, my positions are set in stone. I will never change. I've talked about what happens if China moves to take Taiwan. Do we protect our allies? No, because Cassandra's pointing out not that the founding fathers were like no to these alliances that would get us involved in these foreign wars. I wish it were so simple. And I wish I could agree. For the most part, I would say I lean towards anti-intervention. How do I explain that? Okay. With like Afghanistan, never should have happened. With Iraq, never should have happened. With Taiwan, if they're an ally of ours and they ask for help and they provide strategic resources to us, I think we should provide to a great degree deterrence and we should defend them. I don't think we're in that world anymore. I think people are fed up with this. And I'll put it this way. I would love to be more isolationist, but I do think we need resources. We need trade. So maybe you're saying you're an isolationist, but you don't necessarily mean just trade. Well, there are certain things that we get from other countries that are harder to get here. And I can respect that we're going to have those alliances, those treaties, and that trade. I don't see why the U.S. should be going and fighting wars in other countries like Afghanistan. However, I do understand what happens when the Soviet Union is growing and growing and communism is taking over the world. And you sit there and you ask yourself, if we do nothing and say they're not bothering us, we can mind our own business. What happens when they use authoritarian force to take whatever they want, and then in 50 years, the Soviet Union is global domination, North Africa, Europe, all of Asia, and then the U.S. is like, well, we're secure on our borders. What happens then when they start spreading their influence to Central and South America, to poorer nations? And they were. I mean, you look at Cuba. You look at a lot of the socialist revolutionaries. You look at Venezuela. What happens then when the U.S. is surrounded on all sides by communists saying, we are going to eventually storm in to liberate the people from your capitalism? It's entirely possible it would happen. And then you look at what the U.S. does in return. I definitely think the U.S. Is way better than the communists were. But it's not just so easy to say we can ignore everything. Granted, that is not an excuse for intervention. That is not an excuse for going to Afghanistan. It's not an excuse for Vietnam or even South Korea. But it's very, very difficult to know what's right. I'm not going to pretend like I do. I have tremendous respect for Cassandra and Matt Walsh saying they liked the speech, because I certainly did too. I'm not going to pretend to be the arbiter of truth and absolute morality, because I honestly don't know. I'd like to believe that we could just stay back, secure our borders. That's how I play the game Civilization. You ever play Civilization? When I play Civilization, I don't go on world conquest. It's a great game. If you're not familiar with it, you start off as like small settlers, and then you build cities, and then build your civilization, develop technology. And there's a bunch of different ways to win. I always just try to, my country first. Make sure my people are doing right by themselves. Make sure we have proper defenses. Make sure we have the best technology. But sometimes you're playing a game, and the enemy nations or some nation is aggressive, and they want to steal your resources, and they're massive, and they come at you. It's not easy. I think everybody thinks they have the answer, but I honestly just don't. That's why I'll tell you this. I'll end with this. I can't give you anything definitive out of a segment like this, other than everybody thinks they have the answer. But this is interesting. It looks like the current cultural paradigm has been slammed with a sledgehammer. Some people on the left are pro-war, some are anti-war, some on the right are pro-war, some are anti-war. And people are not trying to figure out what's happening with this. Joe Biden gave a speech that I actually, to a great degree, liked. I say great degree because I still think he passed the blame. And I want to make sure I don't forget to say that. So I was going to say that earlier. Joe Biden is only saying this now. He doesn't really believe it. If Trump didn't draw down the troops from 15,000, they would have stayed. And they would have said, we have no choice. And Joe Biden would have just tried to brush under the rug. If Hillary Clinton got elected, we would still be in Afghanistan. We would still be spending our money and sending U.S. men and women to go and secure a nation that doesn't want to secure itself. The Taliban wants to secure it. They want control of it. It's tough. I wish I had the answers for you. I wish I did. But I hope that what I've said at least allows you to consider some things, because I can't tell you what to do. And that's why people say, oh, Tim's a milquetoast fence-sitter. Yeah, because I don't know everything, man. I could come out and be like, we must never, ever engage in foreign military stuff ever again. We should be isolationist. And then what, in 10 years, we've got, crisis at our southern border, which we already do. But I mean, like military conflict. I don't know. I am not the smartest person in the world. All I can simply say is, we've done stupid things for stupid reasons. We should have followed the evidence, and we should have done this from the get-go. There is no great global threat right now with Afghanistan. Sure, we're concerned about China. Let's keep our focus on China. Why we remained in this country is beyond me. I suppose they just said, well, if we leave, it'll fall, so we might as well stay. That's stupid. So Joe Biden was right on that point. I don't know. Believe whatever you want. Tell me I'm wrong. Comment. Let me know what you think. I think there's something we're going to debate. I'm glad there's some nuance in the debate. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.